It's one of the first questions you might have about the story of humanity. At the very, very beginning, with just the first man and woman, how did we get from two people to, well, all of us? Today, we are diving deep into the story of Adam's children. But you're about to find out that the most interesting part isn't the number. Not at all. It's the legacy.
So let's just get right to it. It seems like such a simple question, doesn't it? How many children did Adam and Eve actually have? You'd think there's a simple number, right? Maybe 10, 20, 100? But the truth? Well, it's a lot more complicated, and honestly, a lot more meaningful than just a simple head count.
And here's the first big surprise. The precise number is unknown. Not a single historical or religious text actually gives us a definitive count. The Quran, the Bible, other sources, they just don't list out a census for the first family. And that's our first major clue, that this story isn't about counting heads. It's about something much, much bigger. So while we don't know the total number of children, the story intentionally zooms in, and I mean really zooms in, on three specific sons. And their stories? They aren't just some ancient family drama. They are the moral and spiritual blueprint for all of humanity to follow. Okay, so first, let's meet Cain and Abel. Cain, known as Kabil in Islamic tradition, is the farmer, the one who works the land, and his younger brother, Abel, or Habil, is the shepherd, tending to the flocks. Now, these aren't just jobs, right? They represent two completely different ways of life at the dawn of civilization, and they set the stage for the first great conflict in human history. And this is where it all comes to a head, the offering. Both brothers make a sacrifice to God. Abel brings the absolute best of what he has, the choicest parts of his very firstborn lambs. His heart is in it. Cain, on the other hand, he just brings some of his fruit. You can almost feel the difference in intention. And because of that sincerity, Abel's offering was accepted, while Cain's was not. And that rejection, it lit the fuse of a terrible jealousy. The result of that jealousy was, well, it was catastrophic. Cain, totally consumed by his rage and envy, commits the first murder. He kills his own brother. This one act unleashes violence and loss into the world for the first time, and it makes Cain the symbol for everyone who is led astray by their own ego. Okay, so wait a minute. This brings us to a really logical, practical question. You've got one son who's a murderer, another who's a victim. How in the world did the human race keep going? How did we populate the earth from there? I mean, there had to be other children, right? And yes, there were. To solve this incredible population puzzle, a really unique system was put in place. It was governed by something theologians called the principle of necessity, a divine solution for a situation that had never happened before and would never happen again. This idea is absolutely fascinating. In Turkish, it's called zaruret ilkesi. It basically says that to achieve a greater good, and what's a greater good than the survival of the human species, rules that are normally forbidden can be temporarily permitted. Because there was literally no one else on Earth, a special provision had to be made. So how did this actually work in practice? Well, according to many traditions, Eve usually gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl in each set. A divine law was then established that forbade marriage between a boy and a girl from the same birth. Instead, a boy from one set of twins would marry the girl from a different set. This twin system was the engine that allowed the first human family to grow, all while following a clear divine rule. And if we just step back for a second to think about the sheer numbers, things get pretty mind-boggling. I mean, the book of Genesis says Adam lived to be 930 years old. With a lifespan like that, and a direct command from God to be fruitful and multiply, you can see how some scholars speculate they could have had dozens, maybe even hundreds, of children over the centuries. And this right here, this is the whole point. We started out asking a quantitative question, how many? It's a numbers game, but the texts themselves keep pushing us toward a qualitative one. What was their legacy? The story isn't about counting people, it's about what those people stood for. So, let's do that. Let's shift our focus from the ledger to the legacy. The reason we only know a few names is because their actions weren't just actions. They defined the fundamental choices that you and I still face today: jealousy versus piety, violence versus martyrdom, and ultimately, hope versus despair. You can see the whole blueprint right here. Cain is jealousy, and his line is said to have ended with the Great Flood. Abel is piety, but as the first martyr, his line ended with him. And what about all those other unnamed children? Their job was to fulfill the divine command to populate the earth. That means the entire future of humanity, spiritually and physically, ended up resting on the shoulders of one other son. And that brings us to the third son, Seth, or Shet in the Islamic tradition. He is, you could argue, the most important person in this story after Adam himself, because he's the one who carries the righteous line forward. After the horrible tragedy of Abel's death, Adam and Eve were blessed with Seth. His name literally means God's gift. In Arabic, Hibatullah, which tells you everything you need to know about his role. He was a divine compensation for their loss, and he was the restoration of hope for the entire family.
Now, Seth wasn't just another son. No way. He was handpicked as Adam's spiritual successor. He's described as the wisest, the most virtuous of all the children. And get this, Islamic tradition holds that he was a prophet in his own right, receiving 50 divine scrolls of revelation. Every single prophet that came after, Noah and everyone beyond, descends through his lineage. And this is the bottom line, the ultimate takeaway about his importance. With Abel having no children and Cain's entire lineage being wiped out in the flood, every single person alive today, you, me, everyone, traces their ancestry back through Seth. He is, for all intents and purposes, the second father of all humankind. So you see, trying to just count Adam's children totally misses the point. The story was never meant to be a census. It's a deep, foundational lesson about the choices that define our human nature. Envy or faith, violence or patience, despair or hope.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? First, forget the exact number. It's unknown, and more importantly, it's not the point. Second, the story of Cain and Abel is this timeless, powerful warning about where jealousy leads. Third, the beginning of humanity was a unique time that needed unique rules. And finally, and most importantly, the legacy that truly mattered, the one that ensured our very survival, was the spiritual line of righteousness passed down through Seth.
Which really just leaves us with one final question to think about. This story, from the absolute dawn of time, lays out these fundamental conflicts of human nature. When you look at the paths of Cain and Seth, what does this ancient moral blueprint tell us about the choices that we still face every single day, right here and right now?